Fellini, when he makes a film, he doesn't care whether anybody ever sees it or not.
Truly? Is that a quote from Fellini?
That's a quote from Fellini.
Is that right?
Interesting. I wonder if that really doesn't play hob with the function of an artist. If indeed you can say that I create for my own sake, my own edification, my own titillation, and to hell with anybody else, is that truly a gauge of art as a form? Because isn't art a shared experience? Isn't the excellence of art dependent on a reaction from the outside to someone's work?
I think that
That'll be just about enough out of you, Doris. If I hear another word out of you.
I think the director who said he doesn't care about about the audience's reaction is caring about it. I mean, it may be his intention. Bergman said at one point that the audience needed medicine, and it was his to dole out, but he still thinks of the audience as an integral part of making the work.
Of course, I think isn't there a risk you run if you preoccupy yourself with audience reaction at the expense of either your own integrity or your own artistic judgment? I'm convinced that 90% of the writers who walk around laying claim to the honored sobriquet of writer are thinking in a sizable portion of their mind, will they love it in Des Moines? Will they understand it in New Orleans? And consequently will deliberately prostitute and write downward to what they believe is the lowest common denominator. And when you start to preoccupy yourself, I think you're in trouble. This is not to say that I wouldn't share the Fellini feeling, if indeed that's the way he thinks, that I will write only for dirty old Rod, and that which pleases me must please you, and if it doesn't, to hell with you. But the reverse, I think, the concern should also be extant, that I must realize that because I am writing in an art form, the whole function of the art form is to be translated to other people.
Conceive of as being the purpose of television? Do you look at it primarily as entertainment? The fellow watching a show, which he doesn't want any deep dramatic meaning, he doesn't want catharsis, he only wants to be entertained. But do you look at it as entertainment or as an art form?
That's the oft-asked, properly asked question. And in informal moments when you can buttonhole a network executive, he will say to you that indeed no. It is not the responsibility of the networks to enlighten, to educate, to lift the intellectual values and interests of a populace. Not at all. They are simply there to reflect what are the entertainment tastes of the masses. They have forever said this, not publicly, but in any private conversation, this is principally what they will say.
This is very much of a chicken or the egg kind of thing.
Exactly.
Are the tastes of the people so deplorable because they are not given anything better, or the shows on television deplorable because the tastes of the people are bad initially?
I think Bernie Harrison may have a point on this, but my particular view, Jim, is that of late, and I have never been a plea copper, I've never begged off an issue before, but I'm beginning to believe that there is a strange groundswell amongst the American populace, the citizenry, that would seek out an escape away from reality of late, that their tastes lie much toward the entertainment quality rather than the cerebral quality.
I don't think there's any question of that at all.
I think it is not only evidenced in television, but more pronouncedly in the proscenium drama. What has Broadway produced as a vehicle of social criticism that in any way harkens back to the Odetzian days, or the G.B. Shaws, or the Ibsens? When a play made a point, by God, they had an axe to grind about what was a current social evil, and they made it.
When a play moved you as a human being.
Precisely, and for that reason it was written.
Sure.
Paddy Chayefsky has talked about the insidious influence of what he calls pre-censorship. How does that work?
Pre-censorship is a practice, I think, of most television writers. I can't speak for all of them. This is the prior knowledge of the writer of those areas which are difficult to try to get through. And so a writer will shy away from writing those things which he knows he's going to have trouble with on the sponsorial or an agency level. We practice it all the time. We just do not write those themes which we know are going to get into trouble.
Who's the culprit? Is it the network, the sponsor, which sure is not the FCC?
No, it's certainly not the FCC, ideally speaking, of course. It's a combination of culprits in this case, Mike. It's partly network. It's principally agency and sponsor. In many ways, I think it's the audience themselves.
Is there any kind of therapy, such as writing about yourself, that helps
I think so.
your characterization?
I think self-knowledge is one of the beautiful and marvelous and creative aids that we have, know thyself. Because you can look at yourself in the mirror and get a whole list of all of the human attributes and human frailties that are extant. Whatever is wrong with you is conceivably wrong with most of your peers. Whatever is decent and good and fine and caring that is a part of your nature is also the meritorious aspects of, again, your peers. But if you know yourself, and this is one of the marvelous key self-tests that you can make all the time in your writing, just a piece of dialogue. Would I say it? And if I heard it, would I believe it? That kind of thing.
Missing part of talent in television. I want to know if it's that there just aren't talented people around, or if talent is suppressed by sponsors or by producers. Why are the programs so bad? When there are good programs on the air.
Well, I suppose one of the reasons that, if indeed that's sort of a beating your wife kind of question, when did you stop doing it? First, to answer, in tacit form, I have to affirmatively say, yes, you're right, fella, the shows are all bad. When in truth, I don't think that. I think there are some good, some adult, some fairly probing, and some very funny stuff on the air. I grant you that an awful lot of stuff is marshmallow and crap. And I guess in part, that's because I suppose much of the audience prefers it that way. I choose to think for sociological and psychological reasons now that the audience is seeking escape. They get too goddamn much reality on the 6 o'clock news when the blood is no longer ketchup and the body count is no longer arithmetic and the screams are not soundtrack. And I got a feeling that the same phenomena we're seeing in Broadway now, in which you see almost a total dearth of meaningful, socially commentative dramas, the same thing applies to television. They're looking for lightweight stuff that doesn't titillate them intellectually, but just lets them escape a little bit. That's one of the things I think is the cause of it. The other thing is that the networks are traditionally bloody timorous about doing anything new, and also they have a desperate habit of underestimating the intellectual content of an audience. They make an assumption that the mass audience has an IQ in negative figures, which of course is simply not true. There are an awful lot of very bright, terribly aware, and very socially conscious people. I think the success of a show like All in the Family is commentative on that. But as to whether or not we suppress young writers or suppress new talent, I don't think this is active suppression. I think this is simply a case of part of their lack of courage. They'd love to deal with that which they already know, which explains in part why you see such a cycle of sameness in the shows. If a Western's successful, you'll see 8 imitators, and all the networks will hit the Westerns because they think that's solid. The same thing with their writers, their producers, and their directors. If these are known names, they naturally gravitate to them because they figure they're known quantities.